Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with certified business growth coach and implementer George Morris. He is a certified scaling up coach and a lifelong entrepreneur. He found his success running his digital agency. He co-founded TEDxBoulder. He is a Techstars Alumni and former president of the Entrepreneur Organization of the Colorado chapter. George has walked the entrepreneur's journey from zero business experience and starting up during awful economic conditions in the dotcom crash to building a best place to work and a fastest growing company. We cover a lot of ground. Enjoy this interview.
Thanks for taking a minute out today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Not at all.
So in your business of being a business growth coach and implementer, you know, being with people, being with the community is a big deal. How did you survive COVID? How did that time period treat you? And how did you change now that we're coming out of it?
Well, that's kind of how I went full bore into the coaching practice. When COVID came, I joined a team to help grow them for acquisition right when COVID hit. And so we all went remote right before COVID hit. So it was like perfect timing. And going through COVID, at least that for the first year and a half or so, we were scaling another company, growing it. And then once that company sold, there was like, I guess that was middle 2001, I guess. And I went to go work for another corporation at that time through the acquisition to make sure the acquisition was all good. So 6 months after that, I was looking to start up something new here in the new year. And I had so many friends and colleagues that were entrepreneurial friends that we went through EO together. And they all said, no, George, don't go starting another company up. We want you to be a coach. You've got practice doing this. You've done this before. Just go be officially a coach. And I said, I got kind of a stigma on this whole coaching thing. But they came around and convinced me of it. So that's how I became a coach and absolutely love it. It's been better than the previous year during COVID in terms of compensation and freedom and everything else. It's been fantastic.
So to make sure that we understand exactly what you do, let me take you in front of a bunch of third graders at a career day. One of the kids, they look up at you and they're like, what do you do for a living and how are you qualified to do it? How would you answer them?
I would say to them, kids, you know what the gym teacher does, and he teaches you how to work out. Well, I'm kind of like a gym teacher for your mommy and daddy's business, and I keep them on the same page and make sure that they're working out and staying healthy when it comes to running their business. And hopefully the kids get that one. When it comes to why I got that or what gives me the credentials to do that, well, I've been an entrepreneur all but maybe a year of my adult life. Had several agencies that I ran and also have gone through plenty of certification processes along the way. So I would say my gray hairs give me the credentials.
Oh, I feel that for sure. So, you're obviously a highly driven entrepreneur, businessman. But when you were a kid, what was your dream? What did you want to do when you grew up?
When I was really little, I wanted to be an astronaut. I always wanted to be an astronaut. I begged my parents for years to send me to space camp. Never got to go to space camp. But then coming out of that, I really wanted to go ahead and build a community that was sustainable and off the grid. And so when I went to college, I looked for sustainability programs, and there was none out there. I applied to one, University of Maryland, and didn't get in. There were 16 people allowed in that program at the time. And nobody really knew what sustainability was. And so at the time, I was like, well, not going to get into sustainable development, so what is the next thing I'm excited about? Well, at the time, it was the internet. It was like 94, 96 is when I was on the internet doing all kinds of stuff, and that became my career for so many years, is building sites and application and marketing and sales. And so that's what gave me the entrepreneurial road.
So, we are all kind of a zigzag line as far as where we end up. Kind of give me an idea, synopsis of what, from your first job that led you to where you're at right now as a coach.
Well, first job, I would say, was with my father. He had a construction company, and he would have me out picking up blocks of wood all around the construction site and just keeping the job site clean when I was like 7 or 8 years old. And I would remember him very, very clearly telling me, he says, George, it's much easier to push a pencil than it is to hammer a nail. And so he kept telling me time after time, like, go to college, don't be in the construction business, because that was my family business. He owned a company in that, and so did my grandfather. So when I came out of school, when I was working through school, I worked for various like industrial jobs and wait staff kind of work, what every teenager does. But then when I got out of high school, I went into local community college because my father passed away when I was 14. So I stayed home with my mom for a while, went to community college, and I actually got a job, really odd one, teaching kids how to hunt like the Lenni Lenape did in the Philadelphia area. So it was like a cultural center I worked at, teaching kids the ways of the Lenni Lenape, and it was so much fun. Coming out of that, went to college, and when I got out of college, I started my own business for the first year, made a whopping $600 my first year trying to build websites for people when they didn't know what they were at the time. I couldn't explain to people what these things were, and took a job with another company for a year or two, and then transferred to Colorado, and the rest is history.
Tell me, what is it that you like the best about what you do? What is it that you look forward to every day?
Getting teams to work together well, to communicate clearly, to understand each other, to see each other clearly, because, so many companies sit here and they talk about talent, they talk about technology, and they talk about strategy, all these different things that you can quantify them. The hardest thing to quantify is the trust that a team has with each other. And there is a huge difference between a team that fully trusts each other, and not trust each other in the sense of, did you say that you're going to get this done? It's, no, I'm asking you to do something, and if you mess up, you're going to come to me and tell me why you messed up and tell me how you're going to change it. So it's more like trust-based vulnerability, and helping teams get to that place and seeing what they can actually do with that is what gets me out of bed every day. I love what I do.
So, we're only as good sometimes as the heroes or role models we look up to. Who's that been for you in your life?
Great question. Early on, I laugh when I say it because it sounds corny, but I always really looked up to Arnold Schwarzenegger. He was always my childhood hero. Just watching a guy that came from outside of this country, came here and made a fantastic life and a fantastic name for himself with just his hustle. I mean, he took things that were seemingly weaknesses, his last name, his size, and everything, and just twisted it around to be his strength. And he still does that. I mean, he is an amazing role model, in my opinion. So I would say Schwarzenegger for one. But then also I had colleagues over the years that were, they're not household names. They're friends that, I always admired their leadership, basically as family men first, and then also in the business world. One of which is a professor at CU named George DeRiso. Fantastic leader, great man, sharp as hell mind, successful entrepreneur. So always been kind of inspired by those kind of people.
It is amazing that Arnold is one of those guys, just like you said, that really worked his way up. And he's just been unscathed by this whole movement of people that are getting pulled down. Like, It's weird that we have to say that now, that, wow, they were actually good people too. But, yeah, he stands up there on that mountain of people that, he's had a prolific, still does. I mean, his influence and what he says and how he says it is still pretty monumental.
Yeah, he carries weight with what he says. He's an amazing dude.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess my next question to you is this, and maybe you just answered it. If you could meet one person alive on the planet right now, who would it be? Who would you love to meet?
It's going to be I'm sure a name that a lot of people are going to say is Elon Musk. Just because I would love to see how that guy thinks. I've seen so many interviews of him, read books about him. But just sitting down and having a one-on-one conversation to get a sense of how does this guy actually think? How does he work? How does he look at the world? I think that would be fascinating.
That is actually one of the top answers between the Obamas and him. That's usually the go-to.
Yep.
So, as a business coach, I'm curious right now. I don't know a lot about him, but I'm really curious because it seems on one hand, he's doing some things at Twitter that should have been done before. But on the other hand, I'm trying to get a handle on what he's doing right now. Do you have a beat on what you think he's trying to do?
I don't, and that's why I would love to talk to him. But
yeah.
I got to say this. I think I think there are some potential downfalls for him. I see more downfalls for him with Twitter than upside. But then again, the guy has taken things that seem like duds in terms of ideas and made fantastic industries out of them. And you look at him with Twitter, and I think one of the big things that jumps at me is like he's going to have the ability to control a lot of the social conversation that we're having. But then I also see how he is so invested in China with Tesla and the creation of his cars in China. And I can't help but wonder what the conflict is going to be there when the Chinese want to censor Twitter or may ask him to censor or put different censorship things in place in order to keep his production in China. I just think there's inevitably going to be some conflict there that's going to be interesting to navigate.
That's fascinating. I didn't even think about that angle. You've accumulated a lot of wisdom over your life, and I'm curious, if you have a dream tonight, you run into a younger version of yourself, maybe in your 20s, and you could give that version a piece of advice based on what you've learned throughout your life, what would you tell that young version of you?
Listen deeply and follow what my elders have told me to do. So many times, I look at it through my high school years, my college years, my early business years. I received so much great advice that I threw to the side. And they would tell me at the time, like, hey, you may want to actually consider doing things this way or that way. And I'm like, no. I hear you. Thanks for the advice, but I'm going to do it this way because I really believe this is the way to go. And inevitably, I would say, the majority of the time, they were right. And if I could go back and tell myself, don't be so stubborn, don't be so thick-headed, ask for help and listen to what your elders are telling you or your mentors are telling you, I feel like I would have reduced a lot of unnecessary wasted time, suffering, and headache if I would have listened to them. And, I tell that advice to my children, and I guarantee you they will ignore all the advice I'm giving them.
Yeah, I get that as a parent for sure. What's been the best fan letter, so to speak, the best response from a client that you've ever gotten?
Well, I would say just even last week, one of my clients, when they come back to me and they say to me, we're really not sure how we would have got through this year without you. And I'm like, awesome. Like that feels like I'm providing great value there if they can come back and say that. Where I've worked with them through strategic decisions, personnel decisions, in terms of working them through team conflict so they can have better results, all those things. So I just had a client tell me that last week, and to me, that's the ultimate measure that what I'm doing is helping them.
So everyone out there has a perception of who they think you are, a version of you, your family, your friends, your clients, but ultimately you live your life. You have a perception of you. Who do you think you are?
How would I have to answer that? I would say I see myself as, that's a great question. I really see myself as someone who is, I feel knowledgeable and confident in what I know, and simultaneously like a child in terms of my overall knowledge. And I have a strong hunger to learn. And so I guess the way I see myself is just someone who has like an insatiable desire to continue to learn and grow and gain knowledge. And I will also say there's a bit of that takes a hit when it comes to presenting with a ton of confidence a lot of times. Because with everything I confidently believe, there's a bit of me that questions it and says, is that really true? Is that really accurate? So, it's kind of this dichotomy that I kind of walk, is be confident with what I know to date, but also have the ability or the possibility of changing my mind later. And that later may become next week.
Right on. So, George, if anyone wants to learn more about you, your services, anything related to your world, where's the best place for them to go?
Just hit my site, gmorris.com. Keep it real simple. Everything's there.
Right on. George, thank you for opening up. Thanks for your time. Good luck with everything.
All right. Well, thank you. Have a good day.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, business, spirituality, and music from around the globe. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.